This is what you want. This is what you get. This is what you get.
You have located GeekFest Rants, the entertainment podcast for genre geeks like you.
Shall we play a game?
Covering the world of vintage and current film and television since 2010.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Featuring in-depth conversations on sci-fi, horror, fantasy, comics, toys, and conventions.
So say we all. So say we all.
And now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show.
Dagobah sure is strange. Now, R2-D2, be careful. Uh-oh.
Action figures each sold separately, like Luke Skywalker and new R2-D2 with sensor scope.
R2, come out of there right now. Help me locate Yoda with your sensor scope. You found someone, I'd say. Your search is over, Luke. Ben Kenobi and Yoda. Learns quickly, Edition Jedi.
Yoda, new R2-D2, and other action figures each sold separately from Kenner's Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back collection.
Hey everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and today we are continuing on a previous subject having to do with customizable, vintage, repro, retro, you name it, Kenner Star Wars style action figures. This is a continuation that we started a while back, and this is a subject we're going to probably continue to tackle because it's been expanding so much. It is becoming practically the lead source of collecting when it comes to the old Kenner Star Wars style. And today I have James joining me once again, who is going to help me with the different manufacturers that are out there. So you guys know, where all these things are coming from and, the good selections that are out there and the different types. So let's get started with our Kenner Star Wars action figure show.
You can collect them all.
You are a toy!
Batteries not included.
Get those wonderful toys.
Details on specially marked packages at participating stores.
Is that the $6 Million Man's boss?
It's Oscar Goldman.
Why do you have that?
That's worth a lot of money. That's much more valuable than Steve Austin.
Action figures each sold separately.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end.
Some assembly required.
All your favorite Star Wars heroes and villains.
I have 3 of each. 1 to display, 1 to open, and 1 just in case.
All right, as we today begin to discuss actual figures, actual custom figures that in some cases I mentioned before that I made myself, I purchased from people that also do 1 or 2, not the mass manufacturing, top of the line kind of customizers, and the big ones that are now prominent that kind of been moving up in the ranks over the last couple of years. We're going to start talking about them. And just like we mentioned before, James and I kind of went at this at 2 different time frames. I started, I think I was actually still living in Jersey, believe it or not. So we're talking about maybe about 10, 11 years ago. That's when I started messing around with switching ahead, doing this or that. And then little by little, I painting, sculpting, a little bit of sculpting, not too crazy, not too nuts. And then it's when I started finding out about these, I guess you can call them high-end customizers. We're going to mention a few companies that are kind of in business right now, and a lot of them are very good. But let me start by talking about one of the original ones that they were around for a very long time ago that I ordered, and that is the Boba Fett that's all kind of like a bluish gray, and it has the rocket firing mechanism in the back, and it comes, or it used to come, in a little box. Now, the consistency, the quality of this, I remember, because I still have it, it was very rubbery. It didn't feel like a figure, but when you just put it up there on the shelf, it looked like a prototype. It looked like one of those original prototypes.
And this is the blue-gray Kenner style, like what we got, but unpainted. And
correct.
What allegedly exists in the wild for expensive dollars.
Correct. I'm pretty sure that there's probably a number of people that make those now as a solid figure of whatever it is that they make them out of now. That's, that real plastic. The one that I have, again, it's a very soft, rubbery kind of plastic. You can kind of bend the arms and the legs a little bit and they won't crack or anything.
And who made that?
It's hard to remember. It might have been a place called Pro Custom Figures.
Well, Pro Customs make that one, and it's possible, and I've never touched that.
It is. I'm actually looking at their catalog here of the old stuff, and yes, I see them here.
Now, I don't know the time frame of when you would have got that, but I personally purchased for you the kit bashed Boba Fett, and that was definitely from Pro Customs. Mark Poon is the name.
Correct.
And I've communicated with him, and he's very helpful and very communicative and a very excellent seller if people are nervous. I believe he's in Singapore, but if you're nervous, don't be, because they're quick. Believe it or not, I've gotten things from Singapore or Spain or other places faster than sometimes I get it from the West Coast. That's how quick and helpful these people are. And Mark has quite a lineup now. And Pro Customs was one of the first ones I recall purchasing for you. And I wish I had purchased it back then for me too. The price didn't change, thank goodness. But I would have gotten into this whole quagmire a lot faster had I done it back then. But I was just focusing on different things.
Another one that Pro Custom made not too long ago, I think it was sometime last year, was the metal Luke, Leia, and Han, the ceremonial Yavin.
Yes.
I know James likes to get a lot of his stuff carded if it's available, or he'll card them himself. In my case, I go for the opened, the figure-only version of it. And these are a number of figures that, they never, nobody really bothered with them for the longest time. And little by little, now they start showing up on different of these customizers.
I got the Leia. You told me you bought all three at the same time. And yes. I was pleased that they made that. But at the time, I figured, well, I'll get the Leia. She looked really well done, had an awesome paint job, and the face looked nice, not like a weird, like some of the Hasbro Leias years later. Really Kenner-esque. There might have been it wasn't like a vinyl cape type of situation. I think it might have been a cloth portion of her cloak or something.
And was yours carded?
Yes, and I got the carded one. It's on a nice blue, like her original card had the blue bubble background. And I really was impressed with it. Got it quickly and very happy with it. And that one was on display for a while. And so, I eventually got the loose Han and Luke ceremony, and then I carded them. And I was really impressed with the cards I got. And, I just have that feeling, since a lot of this stuff, I have the ability to recard them or card them. I like the feeling of having that. It feels more like real. Not just because I'm not a display guy, but if I wanted to display a card, it feels better for me to have that in its, package with the picture and everything. It makes me feel like it's, the 70s and 80s again.
Now, what they also sell, and again, a number of them sell, is the Rebel Trooper from the beginning of New Hope, the one wearing the blue.
Oh, you just reminded me.
And I don't remember if I got him from them or from a complete other person that only was making those, because that was a very long time ago.
Well, I just remembered that might have been my first one. I don't think I bought you one because either you were doing them on your own or something. It was a guy in South America.
Yeah, it might be right.
They created the various stormtroopers and a couple different heads for the rebel troopers from the blockade runner in the beginning. And that's where I got mine. And it's funny now, that reminds me of how that happened. I just trusted it. I said, okay. And he had a display on his website. And I don't know if he ever planned on making this or how he did these, but they showed it on the yellow background like Kenner used to do of various future. Like if they went into 1986 and beyond, if Kenner had continued, he showed so many different choices. An Emperor and Uncle Owen, a Biggs, the blockade runner, Captain Antilles, some other Cantina guys, all the way to an Anakin. I believe it was like a youngish Anakin. So he obviously did this after the prequels, but as if we had continued and the prequels were closer to the 80s instead of closer to the 2000s. And it was really impressive. I saved all those pictures hoping someday he would make them. And I guess that just never worked out for various reasons. But that, I ordered it. And then that might have been like 2015 or 16. And then many months later, I remember getting it, and I still have it. But I've since gotten that, I think, from Stan Solo as well, because they look alike. They basically are just the Star Destroyer commander / Death Squad commander, bodies, mold, but with the light blue shirts and, different color helmet.
Yeah, like I said, a number of these companies have made their versions, and they're a very simple. I mean, very simple. They're a basic design. They can repurpose old parts from other, like you said, the Death Star Commander's helmet and a lot of that stuff. But yeah, that one I remember was one of the first ones that I actually spent real money on. The other thing about this Pro Custom Figures is that they do a lot of, and they still have them on their website here. I'm looking at them right now. The Ewoks and Droids series, for example, that famous Vlix that is supposed to be the most expensive, hard to find one.
And even some that never got released that were like either promoted but the line was canceled. He has them, and they're very well done. And if I was a droid again, like I like the droids version of R2 and 3PO, but I never got into it. And if I can acquire it, I'll get it. But if not, it's no big deal. But yeah, if I was into the droids and Ewoks, he's got stuff that never even made it out, but they're so well done looking, and I assume they're the same quality as the other ones that we have gotten from them.
Oh yeah, definitely, and same deal here. It's one of those things I don't want to get anywhere near that because it's a.
There's about 20 figures and they're $50 each down the line.
It's like quicksand. Once you dip your finger, you go right in.
Yeah, that's for people who are very completist, and I guess I'm a completist of the 3 movies from Kenner. That I didn't even need the crazy Ewok mini rigs and stuff like that. They didn't even count to me.
Now the next, I don't want to call them series because they're from like everywhere, like these that they came from, and some things come in a certain order that is kind of like, oh, we made it, and now they're releasing official ones. I want to talk about a company called Bobaluga Studios.
Okay,
and this is one that. The first time I kind of hooked onto them, I believe, was when they were making Mandalorian figures.
Mm-hmm. I remember when you were getting them and you were trying to make them yourself or get them from somebody. And I was like, I think I have to wait on this.
Yeah. And the problem was that nobody was making them at the time. I think they were one of the first to start producing the Mandalorian looking figures. And they came up with like different versions of them. Like some of them had like a magnet to connect like certain parts of the figure. And then they did a version 2, a little more advanced, different color schemes. And again, this was way before Hasbro decided to throw Mandalorian into the vintage collection, which is one of these collections that we get.
That's right. Did they do a Grogu? Did they do any of those other guys?
They did. They did Gideon. They did Grogu. They did like 4 different Mandalorian versions because you had the initial kind of brownish ones and then the silver ones, the Beskar. Yeah. So they did a lot of versions of that. And I remember I ended up buying 1 or 2 of them. And then the floodgates opened with other companies. And then obviously when Hasbro went nuts and started.
I assume you bought the retro one.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, the retro ones. Yeah. And another thing that this company put out that I never jumped on it, and I kind of regret it a little bit, is the McQuarrie concept figures. Now, why don't you give a little background on the ones that at least we are familiar with, because we do own the modern versions of those McQuarrie figures.
So I feel like it was around 2010, 11 ballpark, could have been give or take a year or so. Hasbro released a line of 11 or 12 of what we know as the original Star Killer, Vader, Stormtrooper, R2 and 3PO, Chewbacca looking more like Zeb type of creature, a female who wasn't called Princess or anything like that, but the star of the movie was originally supposed
Star Killer. Was a girl.
Could have been a girl. And then there was Han. Han looked different. He looked more like George Lucas's head and things like that. So anyway, we have those and we love them. And we were very big fans. We've done shows on Ralph. We've done references to it in so many different other shows. So we were big fans of that concept art. And you buy tons of the ships if you can find them. There's even a guy making a concept Y-Wing right now that's so brilliant looking. I wish I could buy it, but it's $400 with shipping. Yeah. And so anyway, the guy you just mentioned, that Bubbaloo or whatever it was called, they have on their page a out of stock, sadly, Star Killer, which has the purplish or lavender tunic and some other blondish hair and some things, makes it look much more androgynous. I guess it could still be the female or the male, depending on your point of view. But anyway, I have the concept Vader from somebody. I bought it on Etsy or Mercari, one of those websites, and it was carded. It wasn't cheap, but I got it for a good price, and I feel like it was fair, and I loved it. Got it, loved it. The card's solid. Everything about it was real. Now, I never touched it because it's in the bubble, but that's the way I like it. So it doesn't matter. So I don't know if it's fully posable or anything, or if it's more of those stiffer kind of figures, but it's fantastic. And this Star Killer would go perfect with that. And sadly, they're listed as sold out. A lot of his stock is sold out. So either he's gotten past and he's not necessarily creating anymore, but if he is, his work looks really nice, and that's where you got some of those Mandos and stuff. Maybe it got too difficult to stay in business and make new once Kenner, it looked like his bread and butter was the Mandos, and now they're selling them for $10-$20 just off the shelf.
Well, that's the thing. The figures we're talking about that he makes, some of them are sold, or used to be sold, unpainted or painted. The unpainted ones would go for $30. The painted ones would go for $50, which is... It's a high price, but it's not outrageously high. There are other companies that the full price of something that's painted, it's like $80, $90, which is like, ouch.
Yep. And so I don't think 50 is outrageous for somebody who's got a nice small family business or whatever you want to call it, and has to make these or have some factory or pseudo factory make these. So I really am impressed when people can do this. Obviously I know we've talked about there's 3D printing and stuff. That's a whole different thing we'll get to. These are as if they're from, the store. If they feel good, they have the right texture, they painted properly, they're not overly painted, because Kenner would never overly paint things with more than 2 to 3 colors, or 4 if it was really a fancy figure. So his stuff is nice from what I see. I wish it was still in stock.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I never jumped on those either. They even made a McQuarrie Yoda. They made a McQuarrie Emperor, which is another one of these weird things like, oh my God, I never thought anybody could, ever think of doing such a thing. But in my particular case, while I don't own these 3 3/4 inch, vintagey looking ones, I do own, which is another fluke. I think they were on special somewhere, like half price, and I picked up one, and then I picked up another. The McQuarrie Gentle Giant, follow this, Kenner style, foot long, 12-inch figures that are based on the vintage line that never was made of these. So in other words, the version of these figures we're talking about right now, I own 3 of them in a 12-inch height. I own the Star Killer, the Luke, and the Vader. All of them from the McQuarrie pictures.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly but it is kind of it in a weird way.
And that's really cool too. They made, I don't think people even realize, I know we've talked about them. They made I don't know if it was always called Gentle Giant or if somebody else there, but anyway, they made at least 80 of original Kenner line in giant cards with bubbles that can be opened. So it's not as difficult once you get them.
I open mine and I display them kind of like with my 12-inch figures. They're
there.
You
can save those cards.
Yes.
If I recall, I remember seeing a bunch of them that I never expected, like deep into the Jedi line.
Oh, yeah.
In a store in Santa Monica.
Not only that, but I believe they put out a Dianoga. They put out a Wampa. They started dabbling in like play sets almost and creatures. So no,
could you imagine the money you'd have to put out and the space just to even store them, not to display them. To display them, you better have a room, because these are very large. These figures are large, and the cards are even bigger.
Yeah, regularly priced at least $100 a pop. I bought them, I think, for 40 or 50 because there was some kind of special. So, but yeah, this is another group that I wish they would return.
They also made a Mando. They made a Mandalorian. I don't know if it was in his best car outfit or the other, or maybe both, in this large size. I remember seeing that.
Yes,
so
they did.
They've gotten pretty recent. They've gotten into the past 5 years with this line. And if they're still doing it, I'm not sure. But I guess you can get them from like Entertainment Earth and stuff like that.
Yeah, and they were supposed to make, because I haven't seen it yet, like if you look at the back of the big gigantic card, they were supposed supposed to also make an R2 and a C-3PO in that old-timey, vintagey style, but I don't think they ever released that because everywhere I look, I haven't seen a picture of anybody holding one.
Are you talking in the Macquarie style?
Yes.
Yeah, I never saw that either. So if they've made it, I don't know if it's out there yet, or who knows if it's coming. With those type of things, they're very nichey, and because of the expense, I don't think they make as many anyway.
Yeah. And it's weird. You find them at the oddest location. I mean, obviously, you go to a convention or something, you're going to find them, but every now and then, somebody's trying to get rid of them, and if you're into them, $50 is not too bad for that sort of thing.
That's right. That's like a half price. Yeah.
Now, the other ones I want to talk about is that before Hasbro jumped on the retro line in chunks, and by chunks I'm talking about Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Phantom Menace, when they released actual 6 pieces or more, they dabbled in this by having a game and a figure attached to them. And unfortunately, they seem to kind of have stopped that. The first one was Tarkin, and the second one was the Luke with the Hoth Snowspeeder outfit.
Yeah.
Those, I ended up getting the games so I could have them carded, because they come carded. And then for some reason or another, I ended up being able to buy a secondary one where I could open them and put them on display. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of neat.
I have a couple of Tarkins. One, I took it out of the game, and I gave the game to a friend's kid who's big into Star Wars and didn't care if he had the figure, but it was cool to have a classic game. I did the same thing with the original Snowspeeder. And then I think a couple of years passed, though I saw it for a decent price. I'm like, well, the figure alone is going for $30, $40, $50 on eBay. The game was low 20s with the figure. So I bought another one, didn't open it, it's somewhere. And then the same thing happened with the Hoth Ice Planet game and the Snowspeeder guy. And I think the Snowspeeder guy, because it can be other figures, if you were to have a Snowspeeder, you'd need 2. If you wanted to have a Luke in an X-Wing with that same outfit, that's what he would have worn because he just escaped from the Snowspeeder to go to his X-Wing, blah, blah, blah. I found a loose one so I could have underneath my new AT-AT display. And I also bought a couple other boxes that were, again, cheaper to buy the game and the figure than it was to try to find just another carded figure on eBay or even a loose one. It seems ridiculous. Sometimes people are selling the loose ones for more than the carded one. I don't understand on eBay how people price it, but I guess there's much fewer opened versions, so they can say, oh, you want a loose one for your loose display? You got to pay. So I got one that I made as good a price as I could get. That way I have it, sitting with the Hoth guys underneath the AT-AT.
Now, unfortunately, they did not make an official Return of the Jedi re-release
even
box
though
game.
A game exists.
It exists, game. And I guess, I don't know, maybe they didn't make enough money from the first 2, because that would have been a nice opportunity to include a figure that's never been released before. But what they did instead was, as part of the Return of the Jedi line, of re-release Return of the Jedi figures, including some that are very hard to find, like a Man, for example. They included a Mon Mothma, which is the first time that's ever been done,
That's right.
Officially.
That was the special one that nobody had, like the other, like the Tarkin.
Right. A few people I remember they would be customizing their own, but once it comes from Hasbro, it's got a little more weight to it than somebody doing it at home,
And let's discuss this while we're on these things. If you get a Tarkin, or even the Snowspeeder. I wasn't that impressed with the Snowspeeder version, but the gloves and the boots are more like winter-esque and everything. I just didn't like the helmet and face. You can't tell it could be anybody, but maybe they did that on purpose so people could buy more. But anyway, or the Mon Mothma. That's the first release of them. Even though this is considered a retro line, I would consider that an extension, since it's never been made, loosely of the original 90 some odd, 200, whatever the number is up to. It's like when you get a rookie card. That's the first appearance on a Kenner style figure, which makes it, I think it gives it a little bit more pedigree, I would say.
It's kind of like the different levels of canon. This is the closest thing to the original thing. And this is somewhere that no matter how you slice it, it stands a little closer to the original than any customizer that's selling stuff right now.
It's an official manufactured release figure in that style on those cards. I think those are going to go up. Now, Mon Mothma is not the most popular character in the trilogy. Tarkin's a little more powerful, I'd say, even though equal in terms of Rebel versus Imperial. Tarkin was more, I think, iconic in Star Wars than Mon Mothma was in Jedi. But to me, those are likely to go up in value commensurate with some of these other Jedi figures on the cards. It might not be thousands, but I bet you within a year or two, you're going to see close to the low hundreds for a Mon Mothma, just because people are going to hold them and they're not going to open them, and they're going to, and then guys are going to find out, oh, I didn't even realize. Now I got to get that, blah, blah, blah.
Plus, like I mentioned before, in that wave of Return of the Jedi figures, they did include a yak face, which is one of those very hard to find, if you want a mint-in card. Now, granted, this is a retro, so if you're anti-retro, this is going to really twist your panties in a bunch.
And I have to say, I have an original yak face on the card, never opened, so on and so forth. It's as real as real. So I can see where people would get annoyed if you've got a card of a figure that's worth $500 to $1,000, and now all the people who've coveted it for 35 years, almost 40 years, can go and get this for $40, even at the highest price carded from some eBay guy is usually like $40, $50. I can see where it would piss people off. But you know what? We're also talking about 40 years later, and there are differences. People will know.
I mean, just the card alone, the back of the card is completely different. The front of the card has all that weathering that's kind of ugly.
And even if there was a loose one and you wanted to recard it yourself somehow, and you did everything you can to fool somebody, there are subtle things that people have shown on YouTube.
Yeah, and the stamping in the back is different. It has a different year.
The ears are slightly different. The ears, there's some other the way the paint is. All of it was done correctly for a company. You're talking a 40-year-old figure line that's been defunct. And now, let's be real. I get it. I'm the guy who has one of everything original that I got myself. But you know what? You can't just go forever as if if there's people making them at home, like we were raving about, I can see where Hasbro would do it. I just am surprised Hasbro hasn't done this to put all these other guys out of business and then just powered up the line and made another 50 to 100 Kenner style figures of everybody that's been made or not made. It's just shocking.
Yeah, they seem to have only gone into 2 waves of each, like 12, let's say, for example. They don't seem to kind of go beyond 12 per movie at this rate. And we do have on hold or on the wings that we already pre-ordered a set of Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones that's coming. And that is a much smaller...
And the Acolyte.
Well, the Acolyte is also on the wings that we pre-ordered. But what's interesting about Attack of the Clones and Sith is that they're combining both movies into one set.
Yeah, that is funny. The Acolyte got 6 and it's just basically... aired
and Phantom Menace got 6. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the other 2 movies, to only get 3, there's more. And I'm hoping they're judging, can we sell this? Because they didn't want to have boxes on cut prices. So if that sells, then they'll make maybe another box. So we'll get 3 and 3 more to have 6 total. I don't know. They're trying to hedge their bet.
Yeah, it's definitely a sign of no confidence. They don't have full confidence in those 2 other movies, so they kind of package them together as one. This way people can't complain.
The way I see it online on eBay and various other places, I think they overproduced the original 12. They were 2 packs, the original Star Wars figures and then the second round of original Star Wars figures. And the second one everybody wanted because everybody wanted a really pristine R2 and 3PO, no matter whether it was repro or not. But I think they made too many because I keep seeing them available for not too much more than what the original $60, $70 was. The super expensive ones are the Empire ones because I don't think they produced enough. I don't know if you've ever paid attention to that, but to get a Bespin Luke or Hop Han or any of those Yoda, Lando even, those can be like $20, $30, $40 each.
I do see still when I go to Disney, especially Hollywood Studios where they have all the Star Wars stuff, the second box of Star Wars, the second wave. That's still there. They're still selling those.
And what do they charge for that? Do they overcharge there?
I don't. They usually
I think we
do.
paid like $80.
Yeah, anything at Disney, they usually overcharge. But yeah, that's kind of like what's in the wings in terms of stuff that's coming. And, without going into detail into every single figure, because there's a lot of them. I think they also did Book of Boba Fett too.
Oh, they're over 100 now. They have as many. I did the math, and they're in the almost 100, if they're not over.
The only thing they have not announced yet, because some of these announcements are not released, like, for example, like I said, Acolytes and the other prequel films, they have not announced anything having to do with Andor, Rogue One, or the Han Solo film.
Well, I really think there's going to be Andor come the release of the second season, because that's a fact. It is happening. So yes. I think they were afraid to do it, thinking this was the adult series. And I don't think it was viewed. It was so well received, but I don't think it was viewed in like massive numbers. But everybody who did view it loved it. That said, I think when the second season comes, they'll either be a combined, because some of the characters will be the same characters in both movies, or they'll do a bigger line and see maybe they'll have more waves or something like that. As far as the Han Solo movie, gosh, I would like it. I think you would. I think there's a bunch of people who like that movie more than it got credit for. I always said it was like a Marvel Star Wars comic from the 70s. That adventure felt that way. Like if it was a comic book, it felt like it'd be one of those weird stories that they told in between Star Wars and Empire, where the characters could do all kinds of different things and loosely tied into the movies. But I'm not sure we're going to ever see that. I just don't. I don't think so.
The next group that I want to talk about, and in a way it's kind of easier to just kind of talk about certain companies. The biggest one is Stan Solo Creations. But before we go into Stan Solo Creations, I've mentioned this in the past, this is a company that came out of another company.
Yes.
And this is also some of those original figures that we first kind of dipped our toe in the water to, in terms of buying something a little more expensive than your homemade thing. There used to be a company called Smith Lord Creations between these two different customizers, let's say. And to make a long story short, something happened between these two companies that one of them completely more or less shut down and the other one turned into Stan Solo. And then down the line, the other one kind of came back and started competing with Stan Solo, which created a whole bunch of drama that we saved that for another day.
Yeah, you can look that up because it's still ongoing.
Oh my goodness, what drama entails from that. That original company then turned into the Fans Strike Back, which again, we're talking total soap opera drama
on a
here.
Shakespearean level.
Oh, yes. But anyway, the way that it started with Smith Lord was how I got my hands on a Han Solo Stormtrooper. My blue Snaggletooth, I believe even my Yak Face, one of my original Yak Faces, all came from that initial, wave of figures that they were being manufactured under these two guys. Did you jump on it before it was Stan Solo, or did you jump or did you jump in when I jumped in?
I jumped in when you jumped in for you. I ordered you a Stan Solo Bantha. I think you ordered it from a mystery place and then did a review of it. And we all agreed that the Stan Solo Bantha was Kenner-esque with some differences, some slight differences that, were to the owner's taste.
Right.
I didn't personally buy anything until Slave Leia. And then I don't know what year, that was probably around 2020, I think. And then because of COVID it could have been 2019. And then because of COVID in 2020, pushed everything. And we didn't get our Slave Leia till late 21 or 2022 probably. But man, oh man, I love that figure. I looked at that card, I displayed it, and not for the obviously oogling. I'm talking about as a figure, that's what people dreamed of. It was the proper Kenner Leia face. It was the proper amount of soft goods. It was the proper size and dimensions of how a Leia figure of that nature would be. And I wound up buying a loose one just because I never got to touch it, and I loved having it. And when I was able to get some Jedi figures loose, I said, obviously I have to have another one, and I got it. Sometimes they call them blemished. Now, I'll be damned if I can tell you what the blemish is. I'm sure they know, and when they're selling a custom figure, they want them to be perfect. So if they saw something weird and they called blemished, well, thank you. I got a nice little bargain, but I also got a nice loose figure to be able to just put on a display with some Jabba-type creatures and characters.
Those original Smith Lord figures were excellent quality. They were as good as what Stan Solo had been putting out, afterwards.
And it turns out, I guess, Chris Smith was the brains behind the look and the aesthetic of these new style ones, because if that was him then, and Stan Solo is him now, it's hard to deny that he was, very instrumental in some of those styles and molds.
And the hook to this company was that what really got them on the map was not only these original first couple of figures that these two collaborated on, but the promise or the pre-order, because it wasn't even considered a Kickstarter. It was more of a pre-order.
It was a pre-order.
It's
a pre-order.
Like the early
bird. You send us your money, we're going to send you figures.
Right, where he was going to send us, I think, 13 unproduced figures. And out of that batch, there were a lot of figures that nowadays we are little by little finding somewhere else, because that whole project went out the window and a lot of people lost money, including myself.
Yeah.
At the same time, that's when that Bantha project came up. And again, people were waiting for it forever. Stan Solo did the same thing. He wanted to match the other guy. He put out a better product. The other guy ended up sending a few people the product, which was very different from what I understand than the prototype, let's say.
Yeah.
I luckily, because I didn't piss him off enough, I got mine. He did ship me mine, so I do have it, and I'm very happy with what I have. But I do understand that the other version, and actually there's a lot of other customizers that are making their own Banthas, but
are they?
It is a much better quality
I ultimately
item.
Went back earlier this year or the end of last year. I saw it became available, and it's not cheap. I think it's low twos, but
two plus.
Because you raved about your Bantha, I said, well, I got to have this. It's obviously that good. It's in a package that looks so Kenner-esque that it could have been sold, right next to the Land Speeder and the Millennium Falcon. And so I did order it. Now, I don't know if they're still presently available. I think they are. I don't know if they're boxed or loose or whatever. So if anybody is on the fence about it, and even if it's a little more expensive than you think, you really should get it because it's that well made. I love looking at it, but it took me, I initially got it for you, but I didn't get it for me until just recently. And I was lucky that they were still available or became available again or whatever. And that sometimes happens, luckily. Sometimes the initial wave of the Stan Solos will sell out. And we generally pre-order as soon as we see something we think we like, we pre-order and then wait 6 months to a year. But I was very lucky, and I think a few other ones have been re-released of the harder to get figures. So I think that's good. And I grabbed a couple of the harder to get re-releases more recently because they're so good. And each time I buy one or two, I say, oh, I'll get one, I'll get two. And then I go back 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later and I get another one. I'm saying, well, it might lose out. There's only two left, it says. I wind up purchasing a lot of his.
Well, one of the things that hooked me afterwards, once the company went fully to Stan Solo mode, is the droids. I started collecting the droids, either the Astromechs or the protocol droids, with my own set of rules as usual, as long as they appeared in the film, because he did put out a couple that are like maybe the Droids Show or some other things, or some just invented ones that he just
there was
pulled out of thin air.
There was a Boba Fett looking one that I thought was that's weird, but okay, people love Boba Fett.
Yeah, but I've been keeping up with all the other type of droids, and then sprinkled amongst that, he had like a Rebels, animated Rebels Imperial Technician. He had the Snitch, Ula, the dancing girl.
I bought that.
And like James mentioned, Slave Leia, which at the time I had ordered the other one from Fan Strike Back, and James had ordered the one, and then I was able to compare the two, and it was night and day. The quality of the other one just went absolutely terrible compared to the Stan Solo version. So that's when the company started kind of falling apart and everybody kind of migrated to the Stan Solo side.
And I even was fortunate this past year because I like to recard stuff, and we'll get into that more later, but Stan Solo had made replicas of the Death Star droid in two or three different versions. I think they did the original silver chrome, and then a black one, and maybe even a gold one. And that's up to other people's tastes. But I had been looking online because I wanted to have, I'll call it a retro or repro run on cards of the original 21. So I had some of the 12 retros, and then I bought, again, beaters, but the best beaters I could find for the price I was willing to spend. Bought some guns, and then I recarded the Cantina guys, and my Cantina guys were never carded. My Cantina guys came from the Sears Cantina set, including my blue Snaggletooth, and I found a couple of blue Snaggletooths left over from the Smith Lord days that somebody was selling for a pretty fair price from what you said. Anyway, I recarded a Power Droid and the X-Wing Luke and R5-D4 I think I got from Stan Solo because they made a replica of that. And I guess we have to use our words depending on, to some people, replica or retro or repros, you got to spit after you say those words. And to other people like us, it does not bother me because I know I have my original. And I guess the people who have the originals but get pissed off, like I said, about their value going down or something, it's a 45, 50, almost 50-year-old line. I'm okay with it knowing my originals are where they are, well secured, and I'm not mixing the two. But I definitely am happy to have been able to get some of these figures to recard them myself for the proper display the way I wanted it, rather than having to recard my original Kenners from the old days. And then that's when you're mixing apples and oranges. And if I die, they fall into the wrong hands. Somebody's going to say, oh, this collection's fake. Or, I think you're going to be the custodian of my collection when I die because none of my relatives care about my Star Wars collection. So you're going to go through them and keep what you want and maybe sell a few. And I don't even think you'll care if somebody says they're fake because you'll just like, all right, buy it or step aside. And James will be dead, so who cares?
Well, with the Stan Solos, the last set that I at least got my hands on included another astromech, again, that was officially an astromech, but also more important. Yes, it's a very nice one because they never made those triangular head, tall triangular head ones. They never made those originally. And again, that was one of the ones that was supposed to be part of that Fan Strike Back, those 12, 13 figures that never happened. He then picked up some of them and started using that mold. So that was one that was great. But most important, the release of the Tanaka sisters, which is something, it's the white whale of Star Wars toys.
And that white whale, I'd say Stan Solo was way ahead on the bigger scale. Now, there had been people who did some customs that we've seen, some good, some look like they painted up and made the hair out of spaghetti or something, some not so good. The Stan Solo ones, I would say, we would consider that now as close to Kenner official we're ever going to get. But Hasbro has surprised us, and
by coincidence,
all the demons have been exercised, whether it was because one of them have passed away, or because some other
space
problem
hookers
was settled, or there never was a problem, and somebody finally looked into it and said, "Why are we not making them? Everybody wants it. We can guarantee to sell 1 million of them." So Hasbro is also coincidentally releasing the Tanaka sisters with their HasLab Cantina, which I think that's very cool for the people who buy the moderns because they've wanted them.
Yeah, but they got to fork out like $300-400.
Well, ours were luckily not as expensive. And thank you, Stan Solo, because you've gotten yours and are thrilled.
Oh, yeah.
I ordered the carded version, and it tends to be the carded versions come a few weeks later than the loose versions because obviously they come in a batch. They can package them loose a lot faster than doing the proper card and packing it back. So mine have not arrived yet. I'm looking forward to it. I've assembled quite a Cantina setup. And in hindsight, I probably should have bought that HasLab, the lowest one, let's just say, if I was ever going to display it. Because like we said in the previous show, what other modern ships could you mix into the Kenner line, believably, like we're talked about with the TIE Bomber? And they did a HasLab of the Jabba's sail barge. And I'm pretty sure had Kenner continued into the line and made sets into the late 80s, G.I. Joe was going hog wild building big sets and big ships and big planes. the Jabba Sailbard, had Star Wars kept its momentum into the late 80s, would have been for sure. And I feel like Hasbro made it in the Kenner style. So if you bought a sail barge a few years ago with their first or earliest HasLab, you can use that. All the Kenner style figures, vintage style Kenner figures, and it would be believable. And I have a feeling when this Cantina comes out, if you bought it for your Kenner line, and we're going to see a lot of that on YouTube, I'm sure, of guys who are populating their HasLab Cantina with Kenner versions and Kenner customs that they've acquired, like I have.
Now, included in that fact that, there's still some ships that were never made originally that we can kind of supplement. Stan Solo did this circular bubble kind of thing that was parked outside the Cantina. And I mean, it was a little over $100, so it wasn't very cheap.
Did you buy that?
No, I didn't buy that. It was a little too much.
I did not yet. I can't find it under the Stan Solo price, which isn't ridiculous for a custom-made figure that obviously they're trying to make money on. So I'm not saying it's out of line. Since that's something that's like a mini rig, and they even say, I think on their site, it's like in the mini rig vein. If it was in the mini rig price, $50, I would have jumped on it. But, it's over 100. It's not as iconic to me as the Bantha, which I'm willing to pay extra for something so noticeable
more
in the
iconic.
movies.
Yeah.
Yes. And since I'm not displaying it, I don't need to have that presently. I feel I'll kick the can. And when it says there's one left, then I'll probably jump on it and just buy it and bite the bullet because it's so well made. The box is so well made. It looks exactly like Kenner would have made it. And it's just, I'm holding out a little bit longer.
Now, speaking of the Cantina, let's talk about another company called the Next 17, which currently we are, hopefully in the process of finishing up our Cantina creatures that were never released. That this is a company that's been putting a lot of them together. But my introduction was when you ordered for me the Effant.
Mon.
Yeah, keep in mind, a lot of the names, a lot of these companies, they give them a different name, I guess, for copyright purposes. But it's basically that big elephantish looking guy from Return of the Jedi.
He's a squatty guy with a big head and big bulky body. And I saw him and I saw this company. And they had a couple other figures in addition to those that I could take or leave. But I said, oh, this is so weird. You would never expect this. I wanted to throw something in for you as, I don't know if it was a gift or birthday or something. And I said, you know what? I think you'd like this for your, because I could get it loose and it was not outrageously expensive or anything. And he finally showed up and you liked it.
And fast forward a couple of years, I guess, earlier this year, I think it's when we started dipping our toes into the Cantina creatures that this particular person is very good at making. Now, granted, if you really, really look closely, a lot of the bodies are the same. It's usually that the heads change.
The heads, sometimes the arms.
Right, but the color is different, the cloaks are different, and two very important characters that are like essential to everything having to do with Cantina, the bartender and Dr. Evazan. Those are two characters you always wanted to put in that original Cantina.
And I'm not upset at all that the bodies are the same. I'm impressed, in fact, that he was able to keep costs down. And, again, the figures were around $50 or so. They've come down a little bit because of sales and promotions, I guess. But I have, I'd say, 8. Did that sound right? Maybe 9 of them. And each one of them, when you hold them next to each other, even though the bodies are essentially, the torsos are the same, never do I feel like, there's a ripoff. I got the same body and they just changed the head. I don't feel that way. The cloaks, some soft goods cover some things. The rest of it, like arms or something, painted differently. I'm very impressed, and I loved getting them and getting the cards, the Star Wars style cards. And I carded mine because they come loose. He does not offer an option for carded or not. I got them. And sometimes I got like 1 or 2. Sometimes I got like 4. There were some sales, and I think I did well. But man, now that they're finished and I'm looking at them, I am so thrilled. Like really, now we went from 4, sort of 5 Cantina guys, if you count Blue Snaggletooth, even though he really wasn't there. Now we've got easily 12, and between some of the other people that have made certain characters that we've been lucky to get, Oh boy. That's why I say you could really populate that HasLab Cantina with Kenner style figures. Your display would, be blown away.
I also picked up from them, and I think you might have also picked up a couple of these, the Tatooine Luke, the Poncho Luke, the Uncle Owen.
I couldn't leave them aside. And, they're the only way you get, at least it's the only way to get Owen. And I feel like he was a good representation of Owen.
Yeah. And I also got the dual Ben, which is Ben Kenobi with the hood over his head, which is a completely different type of figure, which was, I liked it. It was pretty cool. But I think, again, I'm tempted to kind of go towards the Return of the Jedi side and get a few of those. But
there's
I'm
at least
trying
3 of them now, I think. I know,
I'm trying not to.
Another bigger one. What's he called? Hermie. See, I think Hermie he's goofy enough that for you having a loose collection, for me to card him, I don't even think I could find a bubble that fits him.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
But for you to have a loose collection, I think Hermie, I think you're going to eventually cave and get Hermie, and maybe there'll be a sale or something.
I'm looking at him right now, and
he will definitely fit in nicely with your Jabba Palace engine.
And what he does, again, it's economical. He uses not only the same molds for the bodies, but sometimes it's the same head, but painted differently. So some figures, you will find different colorations of them. Now, I don't remember exactly if in the Cantina they had that combination of the same mask, just painted a different color.
There was one, he has the triangle head type character, and he sees the very first character scene in the Cantina scene with the glowing eyes. And then they made a different version and called...
He made three versions of that.
I'm not sure if the other version appeared in like Clone Wars cartoon or a Rebels cartoon, but I chose the one that looked more traditional. I think it's the maroon body.
Yeah, the first guy you see when you start the Cantina.
I got a proper card. His name is Hem something.
Cantina Trader. That's what he calls them here.
But anyway, I found the appropriate card for it. But I didn't buy doubles. The one had more of an orange and black body, and this one had more of a tan head and maroon body, and I'm very happy with the one I got because I think he's the exact representation of the one we saw only the head of anyway. Who knows what his body looked like.
Same thing with the guy that looks like a goat with 2 horns. There's 2 versions of him.
I got the light blue, the one that's light blue and white, because I feel like I've seen him, if not in the Cantina, I've seen him on like a Clone Wars or a Bad Batch episode. So I liked him a lot. He had that, because they really didn't get much play other than seeing their face for a second. But the Clone Wars and Bad Batch worked a lot of these guys in, and they've had personalities that we now can say, oh, that's our guy. They did it with even the Cantina guys, the original Cantina guys using their old Kenner style costumes in the actual cartoon. And so I love that. Next 17 is really a good guy. I think he's from Europe, maybe Denmark or someplace, and well done. I really am impressed, and I'm pleased.
The other 2 that we got from him, Cantina-wise, is Devilman and the Wolfman.
Oh, I got them too. Yeah, love them. Very well done.
So I'm looking forward to see where he goes next with this. Is he going to pump out a couple of more new ones? Well, hopefully he will.
There's a few surprises coming. He's recently done some like Death Star, well, maybe officers, but the guys who carried on the scanning equipment to the...
that's right.
Those I'm not so gaga about. I don't need those. I don't think they were as iconic, although... For collectors, that's another figure that, you must have them all. I guess I haven't gone down to the modern version of must have them all like I did back in the 70s and 80s. But there's a few that have, like, the pictures are, like, still blocked out. So I'm hoping it's something we would want, and then we'll get them and talk about them, too.
Right, and he also has a lot of accessories. I bought a thermal detonator, and I bought a Greedo vest, just the vest that I can put on one of my spare Greedos.
I see. Yeah. And that actually Stan Solo made a really super Kenner appropriate Greedo that fits perfectly in the way he looked in the Kenner style. I don't know if you got that, but I feel if you were going to use the original Han, either the fat head or the skinny small head Han Solo with the smaller, thinner proportions, if you recall, his legs were a little thinner and stuff. I think the Greedo's too nice to put in your original 1979 Cantina set. So I haven't jumped on the Greedo yet, but if I do, I'll just get a carded one.
Yeah.
Because I'll never display in a plain kind of way.
Yeah. Now, the next one I want to talk about, and we only have really 2 companies left. These are a little different because most of these companies, and we had a similar situation before with one of the other companies, one of them is Funky McClunky. And this guy specializes he 3D prints his figures, but he doesn't paint them. So because of that, it's a lot cheaper than your average figure. Now, if somebody who knows how to paint these things gets their hands on them, I've seen some fantastic, incredibly great looking figures because of the paint job they do on them. It's just amazing. And he has a YouTube channel where you can watch and you can see the manner in which he builds these things, what paints he recommends, and some of the ones that he ships out to some of these painting guys and then ship it back to him. It'll blow you away. So I finally pulled the trigger on this company, and I ordered, and I have him here. I have a Leia from Bespin in the white outfit, and I have Aunt Beru because we couldn't find an Aunt Beru that anybody selling a full blown Aunt Beru.
Yeah, there was one custom that I couldn't find it for sale. I just found it on a picture on Google, and the Aunt Beru, you were supposed to get the Aunt Beru with the fan
with that original 13, yeah,
and that was a nice one. Had they released that, and I really hope Stan Solo can try to go back in the well, but I don't know what the deals were with. Maybe he was not allowed to copy some of those. I don't know, and because I think those would be slam dunks to make a Beru and Owen.
I don't understand, again, how they decide what they want to do in this. But this particular guy, he has done, I think, every conceivable figure you could think of, no matter how rare and how much of a 1 second shot that figure, that character got. He made them all. He does them for Rogue One. He does them for Andor, for Rebels, for all the Star Wars films. If you can think of it, he has it for sale.
I think he even does it in the Indiana Jones in the Kenner style and some of these other ones.
He's got the holiday special figures, and because he doesn't paint them, you're looking at mid-20s per figure, which is a great price.
Yeah, and it kills me that they're unpainted. Or I wish he'd make a deal with somebody who can properly paint them, because then I'd buy more, because I can't go down, talk about a rabbit hole, but I can't go down the painting rabbit hole, because there's still a model. We started a model project, I think, back in 2006. That was either under my couch or at your house forever.
Yeah.
And it's still, I have it. It's still there. We painted like the top coats, and then I was going to have to go back, and I never did it, and I'm never going to do it. You at least can paint. I don't want to paint anymore. I'm too old. I don't want to paint anymore, and I don't want to buy those tester paints and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have that in me anymore, so I'm hoping yours are going to be so fantastic.
Well, like I said, if the Beru turns out good, I can do one for you.
I hope. And that's funny, because there's another guy who I've bought from called Trash Compactor.
That's the other one,
Etsy. And I'm as impressed with that as you are with Funky, because I don't know how they're made. They're made out of resin, or they're made out of 3D printing. I don't know what they're doing, but I got a CZ, whatever that the droid was. He's in the Sandcrawler, and he's traipsing around Mos Eisley also. He's kind of like white and has a funky, weird C-3PO body, but a weird face, like a bug face or something. And I have to tell you, I always thought that was a slam dunk. You're going to make that. He's creepy. Kids love creepy droids. They made 3 droids back then, or 4, actually, if you count the power droid. And now I had access to this. And I said, you know what? He's mostly white anyway. Kenner didn't paint C-3PO's features. He was just gold. So I'm like, well, I can get this guy. He's mostly just white, and I'm going to put him on a card anyway. So I got a card in a bubble. I got this guy from Trash Compactor, and now I have my own version of that guy. Now, of course, his eyes do have some features that somebody who knows how to paint would be able to do that. There's some other, like, I guess, smudge marks of grease or oil on his body. So if you really wanted to be fancy, but Kenner never was fancy. Kenner was, if the least amount of painting and eyes and goods, and this guy looks great on his card. From the distance I'm looking at it, if you held it in your hand, you'd say, oh, I don't think this is Kenner. But that's not the point. I'm not selling it. Nobody's selling it. It's just for me to add into my Tatooine gang if I ever display any of these cards, which I won't even probably do that. This is just now more stuff for the storage, but I'm happy to know I have it.
I looked at Trash Compactor, and again, they have excellent samples of what they sell. A lot of it, yes, it's unpainted, but they also do offer some that are painted. Obviously, they're going to be more expensive, and they do somehow they hook up with other people that actually paint them. My only drawback to these two companies, why I'm choosing one as opposed to the other right now, is because the Funky McClunky is based in the United States, so the shipping is only like $4.
Yeah.
The trash compactor, unfortunately, I think it's coming from England, so you're dealing with $20, $30 shipping, which is the price of probably like one figure. So until I can get a big enough order, I'd rather not pay for that shipping unless I'm ordering more.
I had a coupon from Trash Compactor, which helped a little bit. And they're there every now and then. Etsy, if you look at something enough or you make them one of your favorites, sometimes Etsy will then say, hey, the seller sending you a 10% off coupon. So I think I got it that way, which kind of offset the shipping a little bit. But it comes in a timely fashion. I don't know if did yours come in pieces and then you had to like put the arms in and like kind of like
my Funky McClunkies come assembled already, but yeah, you can pull them apart if you want.
Mine came in pieces and I had to put this guy together like the blow apart C-3PO from the Empire Strikes Back line. And so his arms had to go in and I guess they can come out, but I'll never know now because he's carded. So, but yeah, I had to put them together and you have to just make sure. And then, I'm very tentative. I don't want to break the little thing off because I don't know how soft or hard it is. They tell you a couple ways how to do it if you were like worried. But once I, wiggled them in, it was fine, no problem.
One thing to keep in mind with Trash Compactor and Funky McClunky is that these guys use Etsy as their store. And a lot of times, because I'm looking at it right now, they take a break from selling.
Yeah, they have vacation.
Yeah, you can't access their catalog and see their pricing and their selection. So keep that in mind, when you go looking around. The rest of the other ones we talked about today, they have their own individual websites. Some of them have websites and Etsy too. Stan Solo does, again, a mix of the two. And a lot of them have Facebook pages too. There's different ways of accessing all these places. One thing about Funky McClunky that I like to mention is that a while back, I bought through one of the Facebook Star Wars collecting groups a Empire Strikes Back Luke from the end of the film when he's wearing the robe at the end of the medical frigate. And I bought a Luke from the Bacta tank.
See, that's a good one. The Bacta tank is a good one.
And I like them. They're pretty nice. They're pretty well made. And little by little, very recently, I started looking them at a little closely. Those are actually Funky McClunkies that somebody bought and painted.
And you got it.
And I got them. I had no idea that they were, they were part of this other guy's thing. So in a way, I already have some painted Funky McClunkies by accident, really.
So before we finish up, these are the ones that are on a bigger scale. I've found a few on eBay, and there's probably many that we don't even know of artisans or customizers, however you want to call them, kind of like what you did when you started and you made your own, and some you may felt if you did it a couple times, you could sell them perhaps. Well, these guys have a good style of painting and cobbling and putting together in the Kenner style. And I don't know how they do it. All I know is there's two specifically. I recently acquired a Duros from the Cantina. That's the blue-headed, bug-eyed guy who looks very similar to the Neomodians years later. And there's two of them. There's actually, I think, three, but one of them might be the same one, just in a different location when they had to do those reshoots. So that's the Duros. And you tell me if this isn't like one of the biggest missteps in the history of action figures. Because if you made a Cantina guy in the Kenner style, you're guaranteed to sell multiple of them. And there were 7 of them. You could get people to buy all 7 if they're really into it at $10 a piece. So you could sell a box set. If you do these box sets of retro figures 6 at a time and you're selling for $80, well, if you did a Cantina band for 100 and you sold 6 with the appropriate instruments, well, anyway, Iron Cow is the name of the seller on eBay who did the Cantina guy. And I got each of us a Cantina guy.
Oh.
There was a gray pants one and a brown pants one. I don't remember what they really wore because I studied it and I basically said, well, I'm getting 2. Which one do you want? And you said gray and I said brown. Okay, well, I get the brown. Each figure came with each of the instruments that you're supposed to have so you can do it. Now, just imagine if you bought 7 of them. Now, again, they're a little more than what an over-the-counter Star Wars figure would cost, but I bought 2. The guy was super generous to give me a good price. And I carded him on a custom Figrin' Dan card. And I'm thrilled. I gave him the instrument to card with. It looks like a big bassoon type of, or a bass clarinet type of one. If you know the movie, you'll see him. And then the other one is Keeper Faith. And now I think Iron Cow used to, and he's got websites that show he's done customs. That's somebody I think that's more prolific in his customs. He just might not have as many or be restocking. But the other one, Keeper Faith, is the name of the eBay site. And I got the Duros from him. And it was very, very affordable and a super nice person. And I got a custom card from my card. It's Cardback Emporium, also on Etsy. If people want to make their own cards, contact Nathan there. Boy, I'm so impressed with how those came out. And because the Duros is also another one of those iconic characters that kids would have loved. Why? I guess this was by the seat of their pants in 1978, 79, making Cantina creatures. So I guess we say now, why didn't you pick more? We would have bought more. So, you just never know. I think already they were, by 1979, they're ramping up for Empire Strikes Back. So they're not even thinking, oh, this movie's done, we're going into the new movie. Nobody thought years to come. So I think that's why a lot of those things were done, those decisions were made not to make certain ones. But again, it doesn't make sense why the Cantina guys were never made, or still why that's not a retro line slam dunk right now, because people would be going to Target every day.
Well, this is, again, a snapshot of what we've been up to all this time. And it's the direction that this hobby has kind of taken us into, the whole world of custom figures. And I personally cannot wait to start painting again and testing out these unpainted figures that are, again, so much cheaper. And hopefully my painting skills are up to par.
I have basically gone in one direction. So we've talked about how people hate the word repro, retro, custom. And there's other people who dive in like you ultimately did. And now that I'm kind of in the kids' pool of it. But I'm very respectful of it and the people who've created these figures, because I like to card them. So I say the people who are making the custom cards with the proper bubbles are also like hand in hand with the people who are making the custom figures. So I'm kind of like bringing all hands together. Like, it's a three-way handshake. Me, the figure maker, and the card printer. Okay. That being said, I feel that's a nice thing. That's a good thing. I feel like I'm respecting the hobby that way. You're working with them in some that your creative juices are allowing you to paint. I'm not there yet. I don't think that's for me. The one thing I want to mention with all these customizers, and I'm not talking about the guys that stand solos, the next 17 guys, they're in a manufacturing process, depending on how many they sell, how big their process is and their overhead and everything. But it comes to me, and I kind of touched on it in one of our previous shows, is there an ethical situation? So we have people who hate the word retro and repro, as I said. I have purchased, now I can't believe I'm even saying this, because I would have originally, up until this year, been on the other side saying, no, you can't do that. That's crazy. Like, I'm going to buy a 70 Challenger and I'm going to customize it like Chip Foose does or something. Like, I'm going to buy a nice one, if that makes sense to car guys. Well, I've purchased some of the last 17 figures. I think when I do it with the retro line and I want to take a head or take an accessory, well, that's okay, because that's something that's a modern thing. It's to some people, that's not even a real Kenner figure. But I've taken legitimate last 17 figures and I've popped the heads, and I've taken, I've done things to try to make like the final dual Luke and stuff. Is there an ethical, have I crossed the line? Have I become, a blasphemer by doing this? And there's people who probably would hear that and say, oh, how dare you, this is how dare you even, I never opened. So the thing is, I never opened. Mine are in their box, in their packages. I mean, some of the bubbles might have yellowed because that's a sad problem with the Jedi era, but I can't do anything about that. But I never opened them. But like I said, I've gotten the Endor Luke, and I've gotten some of these other ones that, hey, I paid for it. Some guy's selling it. I pop a head or I cut an arm off or whatever. I haven't done any of that kind of stuff, but I know people do. Am I crossing the line, do you think?
You make up your own rules.
Yeah.
There is a distinct line between repro and not repro. When you take apart a figure, yeah, there's a little more ick factor, if you will. If you're removing, for example, a Stormtrooper Luke, and you're removing his head and putting a Solo head on it, you're ruining a very hard to find figure to create a new one.
And I know what you went through to reassemble your Avengers, to reconstitute your collection, and then get ones you never got. So, for instance, I guess your Imperial Dignitary was one of the hardest ones because of the nose and the rarity. And then a couple of, they had a man or the Yak Face. And I guess you've said you didn't even finally get an original Yak Face. You got a Smith Lord or whatever it was. And then eventually the retro one. But for your purposes, that's perfect.
Right. It's your money. You do whatever the hell you want with it.
But here I am buying, and now I've bought a second Endor Luke. So let's just say originally they made 50,000. I don't know if they even made that many because that line was dying back then. So let's say they made 50,000. And then of the 50,000, 30,000 got bought, opened, played with. 20,000 are still in cards somewhere. And those are the ones that are super, super expensive if you want. And the guy that's open with all his parts and robes and everything is expensive as well. Loose is just as expensive. And then there's the ones that have been played with or parts are missing or things like that. So I'm buying the ones that are, like, again, beaters, as we call them. But there's a guy out there who's probably saying, that SOB, I don't even have one, and he's buying two to top the head off. And I get it. I think about it. I get it. I shouldn't even talk about it because it'll just piss people off potentially. But yeah, I mean...
Well, unfortunately, sometimes that's the only way you can do it.
Yeah, I'm willing to pay that extra.
Perfect example, that Luke. I made my own dual Jedi Luke by using the Poncho Luke without his head. That's what I had. That's the only way to do it.
I've popped off, at this point, 2 or 3, I think 3 Farm Boy Luke heads. Now, mine is an original early bird one. Nobody's getting near it. I got 2 original early birds because I have my brothers. So I have 2 with the original telescoping lightsaber, all unmolested and well protected in the bowels of the vault. But I've bought several Farm Boy Lukes recently for heads, for other things I wanted to try, and I thought about it. It's like, geez, suppose I accidentally have it doesn't come with a lightsaber. I could buy a repro lightsaber from Stan Solo or whomever if I really wanted to reconstitute it to be as close to Kenner, the old days. But what if I got somebody, I don't know the codes. I don't know every detail about what constitutes an early bird farm boy that might be worth $100 in any condition because of his age. And then there are people clean them up and touch them up politely. And here I am, I'm going to pop the head off. What do I care? And it's like, it does occur to me that I'm becoming my own enemy because I would never have gotten involved in this. And I've said it on other shows with you. No, I wouldn't do that. No, I can't. You can't. You can't do that. You can't resticker an old. How dare you? It is what it is. It lasted however it lasted. Hopefully, it's not beat up. But
no, there are some collectors that it's like you can't even touch them up.
Yep.
If you apply paint to something that's scratched, you just ruined it. It's like,
there's people that do what you've done. They've taken it apart. They take it into all its parts. They fix the sound effect inside. They do the infrared bleaching of so the plastic turns the original color, which, again, I love all that because, I don't know if that's as bad. Now, if you go and you get, I don't know where the line is anymore because all my originals are originals. And I've said it in a previous show, I got the first 4 boxes that got thrown away, and they were the only ones that ever got thrown away. And I got wear-appropriate boxes for my collection, and I will put my original X-Wing and Falcon and TIE Fighter in those boxes. So I feel like, they're as close to the way I got them. I just didn't, that's not my boxes, but they're original box, they're not repro boxes. But I had bought a used, I guess we'll call used Kenner X-Wing. I got it because it came with the box. I wanted the X-Wing box. Guy made me a deal. I didn't tell him I really don't even want the X-Wing, but I got it. And then I just bought these stickers from a repro sticker guy.
Oh yeah.
Eventually that second X-Wing, for whatever, I can put it on a display. I can give it to some kid who likes the originals but never had them and can't afford it or whatever. And it'll be nice looking. But I'm never going to go try to sell it to somebody as a new one. And again, I would never do it to my originals. I just wouldn't do that. And I see where people would never do it to anything. They just know it has to be the way it is.
Oh, yeah.
But again, by having said that and said it on some of our shows and having you talked about it in the shows I wasn't even on, how I had that strict line of how things had to be. I guess since I'm buying beaters, I'm buying somebody else's. I can do anything I want with this second or third or fifth.
Right. Oh, God forbid you buy a carded figure and you open it to take it apart.
You know what annoyed me? And it's funny you say that. It annoyed me that I bought, to make a Final Battle Luke, I bought a Book of Boba Fett, Luke Skywalker in the black outfit. It's basically Jabba's Palace Luke with the lightsaber, but with a black cloak. It's $11 on Amazon or eBay, wherever it is. It's face value. It's even cheaper than what a lot of people, probably cheaper than what I paid to get it when it first came out. And I take the head off and I swap the head and I do all this. And it's like, I hated opening the package. I bought it specifically cheap to open the package for a head swap. And I even hated opening that package. And a couple times I did things like that. I had to open a package of some retro collection one for a project I did. It weirds me out. It just weirds me out to open them because I'm quite old at this point now, and I've gone at least 80% of my age without opening things, eventually. And it's weird. I got to tell you, it's definitely weird. Breaking the seal.
It reminds me of this thing I saw on Facebook a long time ago. This guy took like a fish tank and he filled it with beater action figures, Star Wars figures, to the rim. And then he poured acid to watch them all melt just to piss off everyone watching it.
Well,
and it's like, that's
offensive.
Yeah. But it's like, yeah, but you know what? He paid for it. It's his. He can do whatever he wants. He could set them on fire.
And the joke is on us because everybody who clicked on that, he probably got $50,000 because he probably got 3 million views, and YouTube pays for that. So he's the smartest of all. He bought somebody else's stuff and said, "Ha ha," and flipped the bird, and then cashed the check. But I'm not.
We are definitely not that level of insane.
I can't do that.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. As usual, I'd like to thank James for joining me on this subject, and he will return to continue going over this because since the last time we put a show together, especially this particular subject, it's been months. I've had a bit of a slump at the end of the year, a lot of personal events taking place that kind of set me back a bit as far as being able to put the show together. We are trying very hard, to stay on schedule. But I always say this, life gets in the way and things are probably going to get a lot wackier in the future. But hopefully we will be able to retreat into our spaces, that source of joy, more than a hobby, I would say. It's not a business, that's for sure. Podcasting and collecting for me is not a business. So I don't have to customize the subject matter in order to generate likes or in order to generate money, because that's not how this show started. Then I understand a lot of people have to go in that direction because that's just the way that their show is structured. But we don't do that. I will, as I mentioned before, try to be a little more frequent with the episodes, but that pesky life just keeps getting in the way of things. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's show, and I will see you soon here at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
It's Darth Vader, Lando Calrissian, and 4LOM from Kenner's Star Wars Return of the Jedi collection.
Part of the Star Wars collection of 48 action figures, each sold separately.
Now there's a brand new action figure not yet available in stores. It's 9 Num. You can get 9 Num free with 5 proofs of purchase from any Star Wars action figures. Details on specially marked packages. Offer expires June 15th, 1983. Darth Vader, Lando Calrissian, 4LOM, and other action figures each sold separately from Kenner's Star Wars Return of the Jedi collection.
If you would like to subscribe to our show, send us messages, or see video links to some of the topics we talked about today, please visit our homepage at geekfestrants.com or our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or iTunes at GeekFest Rants.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
GeekFest Rants is produced by Carlos Perone. Copyright 2025.
This broadcast is part of the IC Robots Radio Network. Visit icrobots.com for this and many other nerd/nostalgia related podcasts. You won't be sorry for long.